This week is the last week. Wow. Except for next week when we have to have our final exam, but you have a project that will be due at the end of next week, so you have a couple weeks to do it. It builds off of program 12, so you have to make sure that program 12 has been completed, turned in, and graded and is correct before you can move on to this project. Let me go through the reading information and then I will go through the assignment. So first, most of this I've already talked about. Private data members, we've talked about that. We want our class data to be private so that no one can access it. For example, if you didn't have these variables private, you have breed, color, weight, age in this dog class, you could just, if you declare a variable called Rover, you could just say rover.weight or spot.age. And we don't want anyone to be able to directly get to our class variables. We want to have complete control over that. So what we do is we write what's called accessor and mutator methods, which I've already talked about, that either access the values of our class variables or mutator methods that allow people to change the values of our class variables. So here is a class dog. We have breed, color, weight, and age. What we're going to do is we're going to make them private. Once they're private, that means they can't be accessed outside of the actual class. So in the class, we can talk about breed, color, weight, age, do whatever we want with it. But outside of the class, we cannot. So if we have a main program or another class that's declaring variables of type dog, they will not be able to directly access these variables. So instead, what we do is we have the accessor and mutator methods. And what we want is any value we want the user to be able to get to, we make an accessor method, usually called get and the name of that variable. So we'll have a get breed, a get color, a get weight, a get age. And then any value that we want the user to be able to modify, we will have a mutator method, and we usually call those set. So we would have here set breed, set color, set weight, set age. So remember that all the accessor methods are passing back a value. So you have to give a type, and all you need to do is return the value, return the variable in the class variable to the user. So get breed, you can just return breed. Get color, you can return color. So you don't have to declare any other variables. You can just have a simple return statement. Just remember that if you have a variable outside of the class that's calling get breed, you need to do something with that. That's going to return a string, that's the breed. You need to do something with that string. Maybe you want to print it. Maybe you want to pass it to something else. You just have to make sure that that ends up being a value that you need to do something with. The mutator methods are the set methods. Those are all going to be void, and you're going to pass a value to all of them and then just assign that value to the class variable. Very simple. So here we have a breed name. We're going to just set breed to breed name. Here we have a color name. We're going to set color to color name. And these are all declared void. And notice that all of these methods are public. So you'd have all your class variables. They're declared private. You'd have your constructors that would be here, any constructors. And then you'd have all your accessor methods, all your mutator methods, and then any other methods that you might have in the class would go after that. Remember that we put single brackets, we put curly brackets on a line by themselves, and we indent all the information inside those brackets. This was done for you in like Sublime Text and for Code 12. Now we have to do it ourselves. So make sure you're following those conventions. Sometimes you don't want to name your variable something else. You don't want to have to come up with another variable name like breed name and color name and pounds and years. Maybe you want to just call your variable the same variable that your class variable is called. Well, you can do that, but in order for the code to know which one you're talking about, you use what's called this. This means the whatever object you're calling it with. So if you have a dog named Rover and it's a variable that's a dog of a dog class, that would be the this. So this dot weight can equal weight, and they know the difference between the weights because this dot weight is the one that's associated with the class variable, and this is the weight that's been passed. What we're going to do also is instead of having all of our Java classes in a single file like we've been doing, we're going to change and put one class per file. So any class that you're going to have, they're all going to go in a separate file, and then they all have to go in the same folder. So if they're in the same folder, they can access each other as long as they're all compiled. So each Java file will have one class. Every class needs to be public, okay? And then the file should be the same name as the class. So if you have a main program and you want to call it mainprogram.java, then the class has to be called main program. You can call it whatever you want. If you have a class dog, you have to name it dog.java. So here we have a main program. We're using the dog class. We're declaring Rover, Spot, and Chip all as dogs. We have a main function here, main method, that's going to do things with dogs. Here we are going to declare, we're going to actually instantiate Rover. Notice I could declare dog over here, declare Rover here, and then instantiate Rover inside of the main method. And then here is our dog class. So this would have all the information of the dog class. So they're in separate files in one folder. Sometimes when you're printing the values in a class, you want to be able to easily print instead of having to create some print method that you can then use to print. You want to be able to just do a system.out.println and the name of the object. So what we generally do is create a method called toString. So the toString method is how we want to print the values from our dog class or from any class. So in your car program, when we were printing, we could use a toString method to print those values out. So what this is going to do is it's going to return a string. Okay, the toString returns a string, and then you can do something with that string like print it. So what this is going to return is the breed plus the word age plus the age plus the word weighing plus the weight plus the word pounds. So it's going to end up saying, whatever the breed is of the program is this age weighing this many pounds. So here, if we were to create a dog Rover here, so we're going to have a new dog Rover. He's a Labrador, he's black and 60 pounds. And then we can set his age to 6. And then we have the toString method. All we need to do is say system.out.println Rover. That automatically calls this toString method. We don't have to call it. You don't have to say rover.toString. If it's in a place where there's supposed to be a string, it automatically calls the toString method. Println does that. So what would happen is you'd get Labrador age 6 weighing 60 pounds. Okay, so it's a very convenient way to print whatever you want to print when you're printing a variable of a class. You always can just create a toString method and it prints exactly what you want to be printed for that class. And it makes printing very easy. So here's an example of a class. It's the job class. So it's in job.java. It has some data fields. It has some constructors. And notice we used this in here because we're using the same variable names as the class variables. They are not the same variables. So here you have to say this dot title, that would be this one, equals title, which would be this one. Okay, here's another constructor, and then we have an accessor method that returns the title, a get salary, a set salary, and a toString. So the toString will return the title plus earning plus salary per year. And then you might have some other methods. So here you have bonus, you have full-time hours per week. So you have all these different methods in the job class. Now we can have a main program. So we're going to put this in main program.java. You can call it whatever you want, but whatever you call it has to be the same name as your class. So we'll just call it main program. And basically what it has in here is a main. It can have other methods as well, but in the main here, we're going to use the job class. So we're going to have a coder 1, a coder 2. We're going to create them with the constructors. We can set the salary. We can find out what the bonuses are. We can add the two bonuses together. We can print, and then we can get the salary, and we can get the title, and we can do all these different things in here to print the values and set the values of two coders. If you want to, you can copy this code into JGrasp and run it, the job class and the main program class, and run it and see what's happening in it and play with it, just to have an example of how I want your next program to work. There's also another example, the dog demo with conventions. It's zipped up. You can unzip it and download it and unzip it and check it out. Okay, so now let's look at the programming assignment for the week. This assignment, you have to start with your program 12, which is your car class. You're going to separate your program into two classes. One is going to be your main program and the other is going to be your car class. And you're going to put it in a folder with your last name, project 3. So those will be in a folder. You'll have two files that are both Java files, each with a separate class in it. So make sure your classes are public. Then you're going to do some different things in here. I'm going to have you change one of the make to a car make, and it's going to now have, so instead of make and model, you're going to just have car make. It's going to now be like Honda Civic. So it'll have the make and the model together. You have to make your class variables all private, and then we're going to have accessor methods and mutator methods. What you're going to do is you're going to figure out what your accessor and mutator methods should be for the instance variables, and you're going to write all of those, and then you're going to use those methods in your add fuel. You're going to rewrite it now using your accessor and mutator methods. What's going to happen is your cars are now going to be in an array. And so what print info is going to do is print, it's going to turn into print all cars info. So instead of print info, you're going to have print all cars info, and that's going to go through a loop and print the values of each of the cars. Okay, then you're going to replace the 3 cars with an array of 3 cars. You'll have a constant num cars that you'll use. You're going to have to construct your 3 cars. You can do that in a for loop. You can replace all of your variables to be variables of this array. and then make sure you're testing your program as you go. And then you're going to add a toString method. And the toString method, you should be able to just say print cars of I, and that will print the values of everything that we want for the cars. So your program is going to basically do the same thing that the first program did, and then you're going to just be, instead of having your 3 cars, everything is now going to be in an array of cars. You will use for loops instead of printing 3 times. You will be doing the same thing with having them all drive and then printing out all of their values, and then you're going to add the toString method in so that all you have to do is print. Make sure that you have comments in your code. Make sure your curly braces are in the right place. Make sure that you have some indentation when you should indent. And that will be some of the points for this project. So make sure also that when you submit it, you have your folder that has the 2 Java files in it. You need to zip that together and then submit that file for the assignment. So hopefully this all makes sense. You read it over very, very carefully. Make sure that when you make changes, you test your program as you go. So say you're adding your accessor methods, make sure that you add one and then test it, and add a second one and then test it. So don't just go and change all the code at once. Okay, do it one thing at a time. Get that to work, and then move on to the next piece. If you have questions, please email me. I answer all the questions. We can also get on a Zoom meeting together. I'm happy to set up individual Zoom meetings. I also have my office hours on Thursday from 4 to 5, so I will be there then. But I'm very happy to meet with people outside of that. This is the rubric for the grading. So you'll see that comments and indentation are 5 points worth of that. And the rest of the rubric is here. We're going to have our final exam next week. I will have it available to you starting Thursday at 2. It'll be available until Sunday at 5. So make sure you take the test before Sunday at 5 o'clock. And this project will be due Sunday by midnight. So I would recommend turning everything in before that. However, you will have until Sunday midnight to turn this in. Have a great week, and it's been a pleasure teaching you all. I hope you have a wonderful holiday break.